Welcome to the OU's All Parsha video series, Parshas Behaalotekha. So it's a very meaty parsha, a lot of important stories, a lot of important halachos, and right dab smack in the middle of the parsha are these two pesukim surrounded by upside down nuns. What are the shape of the upside down nuns? Are they part of the sentence themselves, or as we have them separate from the pesukim? So many different minhagim. There's not halacha shir, but it's a fascinating. Where does it come from? Which original svarim did it appear in? When did it not appear? There's a famous tshuva of, I think it's the Nod Behuda, about where more or less sets the psak for us. It's in Yeridea, Siman Ayin Daled. In any event, what do they symbolize? What do these upside down nuns symbolize? So it's actually Machlokas Tanaim, the Gemara in Shabbos, Kuftas Vav and Beis, and it's not altogether clear that these two shitos are mutually exclusive. The Tanakama says that the upside down nuns, or the cordon off nuns, or the bracketed nuns, a nun before the pasuk Vayhi bin Soha Aaron, I should have said that, Vayom Moshe, Kum Hashem be'afutzu oivecha v'yanusam misanecha miponecha. The next pasuk, Uvunocha Yamar, Shuva Hashem Rivivos Alfa Yisrael. Those two pesukim appear with a nun before Vayhi bin Soha, the first pasuk, and a nun after Uvunocha Yamar, the second pasuk. Why do these two pesukim come bracketed by nuns? So according to the Rabbanan, Tanakama, the Gemara in Shabbos, is to signal that these two pesukim are out of place. They belong somewhere else in the Torah. We don't know where that is, at least from the Gemara, but the language of the Chacham are ein zemakoma. So to signal that these pesukim are out of place and disjointed, dislocated from their natural setting, the Torah puts nuns around them. That's the shita of the Tanakama. Rebbe Nasi said, "Mipnei shesefer choshav bifnei atzmo," not about location where these two pesukim should naturally belong, but about autonomy. These two pesukim are an autonomous separate unit, which effectively, turns chamisha chumshei Torah into shiva chumshei Torah, because there are the four books, Shmos, Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, and Devarim. And if this is a sefer b'fnei atzmo, we take Rebbe literally, then Bamidbar is essentially composed of three svarim: Pri Vayhi bin Soha, the two pesukim of Vayhi bin Soha and Uvunocha Yamar, and then everything else from Behaalotekha till the end of Moshe. So there may be 7 Torah. So being that it's a separate autonomous unit, almost like a separate chumash, so it's cordoned off by upside down nuns. Now these don't have to be mutually exclusive. It could be both. It could be that Hashem took pesukim from somewhere else where they naturally belonged, inserted them into an unnatural location like the Tanakama in Parshas Behaalotekha, and not only inserted them out of place, but converted them into an autonomous, standalone sefer. It sounds that way from the Brisa, which the Gemara quotes, after quoting this machlokas between Tanakama and Rebbe. Again, Tanakama says, Ein zu makoma. Rebbe says, Sefer b'fnei atzmo. The Gemara quotes B'shim Gamliel that tells us that one day this parsha will return to its original place. Asida parsha zu shete'aker mikan v'tikasev b'makoma. So the parsha will be restored. And what was it written here? In order to separate between some of the mishaps early in Behaalotekha and some of the mishaps in the end of Behaalotekha. And of course, the Gemara then tries to decide what are the mishaps before this section occurs in Behaalotekha. Doesn't seem to be anything terrible. After these two pesukim, Vayiham Kimis Onanim, and his Avutava, and Eldad Umedad, and Aaron and Miriam, and the Meraglim, and Korach, and Pinchas seems to fall, Cosby and Zimri seems to fall apart. So Chazal try to locate some initial stirrings of Peronius. But the second part of the Brisa doesn't just tell us the parsha will be restored to its location, but that it's meant to separate between the perennials and perennials, between calamities and calamities, disasters and disasters, and it's not altogether clear what the earlier disasters before this parsha are. But that second part of the Brisa suggests that it's not just that this parsha or these two pesukim are out of place, but Hashem is trying to create a barrier between earlier perennials and later perennials. The best way to create a barrier is to create a separate autonomous parsha, a separate autonomous sefer. So again, it's not really clear that Rebbe and the Chachamim have to argue. It sounds like they are arguing, but from our perspective, we may be able to synthesize the two shitos, that this section of two pesukim is both a two pasuk interdiction in its wrong place, and also it's a two pasuk unit that becomes standalone and autonomous. Now, of course, Rabbi Soloveitchik talked about the iconic meaning of these two pesukim. I think I just saw it was posted on YouTube. Nosim Anachnu, you want to look it up, Rabbi Soloveitchik. Nosim Anachnu, I think it was written in English. But paraphrasing what he said in general, not just what he said, but others have thought that this was a parsha that was meant to serve as the intro to Eretz Yisrael. Think about Parshas Beha'alotekha as potentially the end of the Torah. Had we not betrayed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, starting with the end of Beha'alotekha, we would have entered Eretz Yisrael 3 days. L'sir lehem menucha derech shloshes yamim. It's a pasuk in Parshas Beha'alotekha. We were 3 days away from Eretz Yisrael, and we would have entered Eretz Yisrael, launched sovereignty, monarchy, Beis HaMikdash, kingdom of Hashem, utopia, end of days. So essentially the Torah is about to end. There's no Arvis Moav, there's no Devarim, certainly no Meraglim, there's no second census, we've already counted. The camp has been established, the flags are raised, people are marching, we're in military formation, we have the Levim, we have the Chatzosos, we're ready to enter Eretz Yisrael, and this should be the battle cry, and we flinch and we fail, and then this becomes not the battle cry, but almost, and I'm not sure that I'm exactly paraphrasing Rabbi Soloveitchik, but a little bit different, maybe, that this becomes not the marching song of entry into Eretz Yisrael, but almost the elegy and the lament of Jewish history, where we have so many oyevim, and we are still waiting for Hashem to be Kum Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha, because our oyevim are here, His oyevim, and of course, and we're praying desperately, Shuv Hashem, Rivavos, Alpha Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, protect the tens of thousands of our children who are right now protecting our country and protecting our future in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Syria. So, and this pasuk that should have been a triumphant pasuk becomes almost a lament, and as history converts it. Anyway, it's a fascinating literary phenomenon to have extra letters inserted into the Torah, if they really are extra letters, upside down letters. What does that even mean? There are no letters that are upside down nuns. And again, it seems as if the reason is to both denote that it's an out-of-place parsha, and also to signal that this is a standalone buffer between the beginning and the end, and a standalone sefer. What's fascinating to me about this Gemara in Shabbos, which is I really want to speak about, this is all just by way of introduction, just to give you some familiarity, is the notion that Torah is sometimes disjointed by history. And when we are redeemed, then Torah is returned to its original state, its more perfect state. Namely, under perfect conditions, these two pesukim should have appeared elsewhere. Now, where should they have appeared? It's not clear from the Gemara. Rabbeinu Bachye says that it should have appeared actually 50 parshios, not sedros, 50 parshios earlier. If you count back 50 samachs and peis, you'll get back to Bamidbar Perek Beis, where the Torah describes Perek Beis pasuk Yud Zayin in Parshas Bamidbar, v'nasa ohel moed machane halavim betocha machane kasher yachanu ken yiso ish ayado l'gilhem. Basically, where we've already set up the camp, we've already set up the flags, including the Levim, and we're ready to march. And then Hashem should have said, Kum Hashem, we should have davened to Hashem, Kum Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha, v'nocha yamar shu Hashem revos alpha Yisrael, because the Aaron marches and then returns back from battle. And because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that the end of Sefer Bamidbar would contain the deterioration of Jewish history and the deterioration of our redemptive vision, so Hashem had to take these pesukim out of their original location and move them as a buffer. Remember, we're trying to buffer between early Puranias and late Puranias. Hashem had to take pesukim out of their location, break the natural flow of Torah, almost compromise Torah's natural sequence, move two pesukim to create that buffer, being Puranias and Puranias. But one day, when we return to a more perfect state, Torah's perfection will be restored, and those two pesukim will move back to their original location. Which means the following, and here's the point. Torah is eternal, and Torah is timeless, and Torah is beyond history, and Torah is above history, and Torah has nothing. Torah kad maliolam alpayim shana. We just celebrated Shavuos, Yom Matan Torah, which was given in a desert, beyond human civilization, beyond human experience. And it's not on a day that we know, because it's beyond time, and it's... But in this world, Torah is affected by human behavior. And when I say it's affected by human behavior, I mean two things. It's obviously affected by religious human behavior. If people accept Torah, then Torah has a place. If people don't accept Torah, it doesn't have a place. It doesn't, although in heaven it's cosmic and it's unrelated to human decision-making, if we express it on this world, then Torah exists on this world. If we don't express it on this world, then it doesn't exist. And every time a person learns a piece of Torah, it brings Torah, which is the will of Hashem, so effectively HaKadosh Baruch Hu, more into this world where it wasn't before. But the deeper, not deeper, but the separate message is it's not just affected by yours and my decision to learn or not to learn, to adhere to the will and not to adhere to the will, but by historical circumstances that have little to do, at least to our minds, with a direct response to how much Torah is being studied or not. So obviously, let's say in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, when people deviated from Hashem's will, so Torah was less present. It was, as we would say, broken, at least vis-a-vis its presence in this world. But what about other points in history where history was unkind to Torah and unkind to the people that represent Torah? That means that Torah is a living organism, and as a living organism, it's affected by history, because we're living through history and we're trying to bring Torah to this world. And this Gemara in Shabbos asserts that Torah's presence is a function of the vicissitudes of history, and when Am Yisrael reaches Geula, then Torah reaches a repair, because history is repaired, and the Jewish people's plight is repaired, and therefore Torah is repaired. And it doesn't just mean, in my opinion, that breaking of Torah and repair of Torah is not just charted by how many people are learning Torah and applying the will of Hashem, and people are not, but by the state of Torah and the state of the Jewish people who represent Torah. And I think that as you moved on in Jewish history, this was echoed at different moments in history. So the first thing I was thinking about was Rabbi Hanania ben Tradio, when he's burnt with the Sefer Torah, and his daughter asks him, Abba, like, what will your end be? Something effectively to that nature. And he says that now that Torah has been dragged into the battle, then whoever will avenge the honor of Torah will avenge my honor. Knowing, essentially saying, I'm good, not sugarcoating or tainting his execution with rose-colored glasses, but knowing that there's a longer story and that Torah will be avenged and that he's now on the side of Torah, aligned with Torah, he'll be revenged also. But that's still someone who's learning Torah, and his execution is a diminishing of Torah learning. When Chananya ben Taragin died, we had one less Tana, and his Torah was no longer as available. But then as you go through Jewish history, it's almost as if Torah becomes personified. And as we suffer, we turn to Torah, and we remind Torah, you are suffering alongside of us, and you should do our battle for us. And to me, the most memorable and haunting expression is one of the kinos we say on Tisha B'Av. We say 2 or 3 kinos, depending upon your minhag, to recall the horrible, horrible decades of the Crusades, which began at the end of the 11th century and stretched through the 12th century in the Jewish Rhineland, Franco-German border cities, particularly Shom, Ashbira, Vermaisa, and Magenza, Spires, Worms, and Magans. And at one point in the Kina, which begins with Hacharisha mimeni va'adabera, the Paitan, the poet, turns to Torah and says, Torah, Torah, chigri sak. Torah, you should mourn with us, because this crusade pulverized through great Torah towns, and it wasn't just that the Jewish people were suffering. It wasn't only just, I don't get the sense, well, now there are fewer people to learn. It was Torah, now that the Jewish people are under siege and being persecuted, you're suffering, and we expect you to mourn with us, and we also expect you to almost battle with us. Torah's not going to pick up a spear and battle, but if we're married to Torah, and we are married to Torah, Torah, so all of a sudden we're walking through history alongside of our wife, alongside of Torah. And the fate that befalls us affects Torah. Again, when we betray Torah, Torah is affected, but also when the Jewish people's plight plunges, then Torah's fate and status in this world also plunges. And I say this because, especially in the wake of both the Holocaust to a degree and October 7th and their different experiences, we have to train ourselves to see these events not just as an attack on the Jewish people, and in the case of October 7th, an attack on the land of Israel, but an attack on Torah. In particular, on October 7th, it can't be incidental that it happened on Simchas Torah. Now, when I say it can't be incidental, if you were to interview the Sinwars, and you'd have to go to a very fiery place to interview them, and they probably couldn't open their mouths to speak because they'd be full of flames. But in theory, if you could interview them and you ask them, why did they choose October 7th? I don't imagine they were in mind, let's try to attack Torah on the day of Simchas Torah, when the Jews celebrate their Torah, and turn this into an attack on Torah. they probably tried to leverage the fact that the bases were under man and people were off on vacation, happened to also be Shabbos. I don't even know if they knew it was Simchas Torah. But be that as it may, there are larger forces at work. And the fact that Jewish people were attacked on Simchas Torah means that de facto, whether it was planned or not, it was an attack on Torah. And there was a Chil Hashem, and there was a Chil Torah. And part of our response has to be, how can we replenish and repair Torah, because Torah is not static and eternal beyond human reach and human imprint and influence, but as the Gemara in Shabbos says, Asida Torah shetachzar limakoma, or shete'akar mikam v'tikaseh bimkoma le'asid lavo. So that's not just a one-off event. When Mashiach comes, then whatever irregularities in Torah were caused by historical necessities will be reversed. But it's a process, and part of the process of Gula is whenever Torah gets tarnished, to feel like we're repairing it, and that's what makes the struggle in Israel to find that perfect blend of Torah and defending our people so complicated, because this isn't just a battle for land and for history and for people, although it is, and we need people to battle that. It's a battle over Torah, and every Blat Gemara that's learned is part of that battle, and every piece of Torah that's learned is part of that battle, and it's hard for us to find one common frequency by which we balance all these competing needs. And obviously someone who teaches in Hesder Yeshiva, and who I didn't serve personally in the army, my children served, and one was seriously injured, and students serve, and the entire yeshiva is empty for the last year and a half, not the entire, but it's an empty-ish yeshiva. So I believe that at this point in history, based on my Masara, the perfect blend is trying to do both, and other people are not. And it's a hard bridge to cross and still feel achdus with people, especially when it comes to such a painful price. But achdus is real, and the challenge is real, not when it's easy, but when it's painful. So I think Beha'alotekha and the whole migration of these two pesukim from its natural location, which again in Bein Bachaya says is in Mamei Perk Beis, and the promise of the Bryce and Shabbos that one day Torah, these two pesukim will be returned to their natural location and will be repaired, is a statement far beyond just these two pesukim and far beyond the end game of history, that one day when Mashiach comes, these two pesukim will be returned to their place. It teaches us to see Torah as tethered to history. It teaches us to see Torah as affected by history, and not just affected by our own internal decisions whether to learn more or less and to fulfill halacha more or less, which certainly affects Torah's presence. But being that Torah is tethered to the Jewish people and Jewish identity, and the Osios in the Torah represent the 600,000 people at Har Sinai, even though there aren't 600,000 Osios, but that association reminds us that as we rise, Torah's prestige rises, and as we fall. And I'll just end with a interesting story. There was a very special person named Moshe Moshkovitz. He lived, thank God, to a very old age. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago, I think, in his mid-90s. And he single-handedly re-landscaped the religious Torah world in Israel. He was responsible for a lot of religious, primarily Zionist religious enterprises and initiatives. He essentially founded Efrat, many other organizations, a real visionary for that original generation of pioneers, the Ben Gurion generation, roughly. And he was also the chairman of Yeshivat Haretzion for many years. And I mean, pretty much since its inception in the late 60s. And if you've ever visited the yeshiva, and I'd love for you to come visit, if you're in Eretz Yisrael this year, we're literally 2 minutes off the road on the way to Maras HaMachpelah. We're right between Kevarach and Maras HaMachpelah, so people typically combine that trip. So if you're traveling to Maras HaMachpelah, give me a heads up and say, oh, we're coming by, and come by to the Beis Medrash. If you haven't seen it, it's a beautiful Beis Medrash, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, beautiful gardens, a fish pond. You feel majestic. You feel that Torah is being beautified and being granted elegance. And someone once asked Moshko, why, and this is when the yeshiva was built in the 70s, thank God today there are plenty of Batei Medrash and plenty of Batei Knesset that have prestige and glory and ornate, but then it was very rare. And someone asked Moshko, what is this, a museum, a movie theater, that you're building it with such beauty and elegance and grandeur? And he said, what, Torah doesn't deserve that beauty and that elegance and that grandeur? And for so many years in Jewish exile, we weren't afforded the opportunity to build grand palaces of Torah because we were cast as the infidel, who were castaways from history. And part of the psychological terror directed at us means we couldn't build beautiful buildings of worship and study. And now we are back in history and back in our land, and Torah is back. And part of the way that Torah is back is by building these palaces of Torah. And again, how we allocate resources communally, you can make claims that maybe money should be used for other needs. That's the practical application. But the concept, if we had unlimited funds, yes, we have the opportunity to celebrate Torah by constructing beautiful abodes for Torah. So when you read Parshas Beha'alotekha this week and you see in your Chumash the nun before the pasuk Vayibin Soharon and the nun after Uvenucha Yomar, keep in mind that this Torah will change one day, according to the Gemara in Shabbos, and those two pesukim will be restored to their proper location and will once again have a Torah in its pristine, perfect form, and now we have it in its second version, perfect form, but the version that rises and falls or shifts and moves as Jewish history shifts and moves.